Well, welcome everybody. Thank you again so much for joining us this morning. I know everybody's generally pretty busy middle of the week, but thank you for taking the time out to come and hear a little bit about estate planning and really how estate planning and real estate work together. We're incredibly excited to be kicking off our series with Miss Kelly Dipple to be talking about how your estate planning and real estate really do interact and how important it is to ensure that you do have a real estate attorney and an estate planning attorney who understand what each other do and how important the different and respective jobs are. So for those of you who don't have an estate plan, you're going to get a little bit of a crash course in estate planning today. And for those of you who do already have one, it'll be a great refresher on not only what's in your estate plan, but why those documents you set up are so important. We're going to really be focusing on how to protect your real property today, though. So often what I at least hear is people come in and say, I just have a piece of property. The reality is that piece of property is likely a very significant asset, but regardless of the value, it's something worth protecting because that is a part of your legacy and a part of something that you have built within your estate. I'm then going to be turning it over to Ms. Kelly to be talking about what is the real estate market looking like today, and just in general, a little bit about herself, her business, and how she can ultimately help you during transition phases when it comes to property. So we are going to jump on in. So first off, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of estate planning. So again, if you've already set up your plan, odds are you know what these documents are and have them within your plan. But for those of you who don't, this is going to be a great little crash course in why these documents are so important, and that if you don't have them, why it is so important to not delay getting them set up. So first and foremost, you have your advanced healthcare directive. Anyone over the age of 18 needs one of these directives. The reason is that as soon as you turned 18, nobody has an automatic right to make your medical decisions or even know what room of a hospital you are in. So once you hit 18, your parents lose that right. If you become a married person, your spouse doesn't automatically have that right. You need to either be able to verbally tell the doctor that the person has authorization to know where you are and to make your decisions, or you have to have it in writing so that the doctor knows that person is authorized. So if you do not have a healthcare directive, or if you have one that is older than about 3 years old, I would recommend coming in and either setting it up or having it reviewed. With COVID and everything that happened, so many of our documents we've discovered have people in them that may no longer be with us. And so we need to ensure that we get your documents up to date if they are not currently. The next document is your durable power of attorney. Now, this one, again, if you're over 18, you need to have this in place, because if you became incapacitated, this is the document that says who can handle your financial matters. One of the key parts of your power of attorney is the fact that this would also allow someone to manage any real property that you have. So if you have a home, if you have secondary residences or investment properties, this document is incredibly crucial because it would allow a person to essentially manage those on your behalf and ensure that they don't fall apart if you were incapacitated. Then the next two documents actually work together. So you have what's called a pour-over will that works with your trust. Now, the trust is the cornerstone of your estate plan. This is the document that says who would take care of your assets if you no longer could, who would determine if you were still competent enough to take care of your own assets. It's where you decide where those assets ultimately go. One of, though, the downsides of a trust is that it only protects what it actually owns. And one of the biggest things that has to happen when you set up a trust is that if you have property, you also need to ensure that you have a deed giving your property to your trust. If you don't, there is a risk of it going through what's called probate, which is a court proceeding that would ultimately then decide where that property goes. Your pour-over will is there to ensure that any asset that should have been in the trust that is not is essentially scooped up and given back. Because again, we want to ensure that at the end of the day, you have control over where things are going and that your property is protected from going through a very expensive court process. Now, that was a lot of information in a fairly quick amount of time. And so if you have further questions on this, if you need an appointment to review your plan or to get one started, please don't hesitate. We can make appointments during this webinar on our website or by calling our number. Now, I mentioned it a little bit on the prior slide, but a living trust in your estate plan is the process of actually anticipating and arranging what your wishes would be if you became incapacitated or actually passed away. So we cannot emphasize pre-planning enough. The most heartbreaking situations are the people or the families who come to us and a loved one is now incapacitated and has not set up planning. Unfortunately, at that point, our options are incredibly limited, and generally anything that we can do becomes significantly more expensive because the limited options. So again, if you don't have one or you have one that hasn't been looked at in about 3 to 5 years, please come in and see us. Now, one of the other components with your trust that I mentioned is it actually addresses how and when your assets are distributed to your family. The when is often something people don't think about. Depending on who is actually inheriting your asset may dictate the age in which they should inherit it, the amounts they should inherit each year, and different parameters depending on their individual situation. So if you have a family where things may be a little more complicated, that's okay. Your trust can still make sure that the control is with you and that your family in your specific situation is taken care of. Now, again, just to quickly go over, if you have an estate plan, generally speaking, you should have a trust, a pour-over will, a durable power of attorney, and an advanced healthcare directive. If you're sitting here and you don't know if you have these, if you had a trust set up with another attorney and you're not sure that they set these up for you, whatever the scenario is, we can always meet with you and either ensure that you do have proper documentation or ensure that the proper ones get set up. Now, again, we talked about assets. And so one of the other components is, again, that when you set up a trust, there are certain things that actually have to go into a trust. That includes your checking account, savings account, any brokerage accounts, and the big one is real property. To put in perspective why this is so important and why we're emphasizing real property, if you had an asset, like a piece of property, that's worth, let's say, $1 million in gross value, and you did not protect it in a trust, there is a significant risk, like I mentioned, of that asset having then to go through probate. An asset of about $1 million in gross value could potentially in probate cost the family about $40,000 just to get it distributed where you would have wanted it to go anyways. And so again, your trust is so important that not only is it established, but that the assets are properly placed in it. And this is again why it's so important to ensure that your real estate agent also understands the value of a trust, because they can be there to ensure that they remind you to put something in a trust or to set one up after you have bought a new property. One of the other pieces with real property has become long-term care needs. So health concerns at this point really are at the top of the list of concerns for seniors and their families. A lot of times when we are talking to people, their concern about becoming ill and not having control or not being able to manage their estate, it becomes their top concern. And so this is something that we take very seriously and that we are incredibly passionate about, and very, very passionate about ensuring that not only are you cared for, but again, those assets and that legacy that you have built do not just disappear because you now have a health concern. Unfortunately, the numbers at this point regarding long-term health concerns have skyrocketed. We have found about 70% of people over the age of 65 are going to need some form of long-term care. This is in part due because Alzheimer's and dementia, those numbers and those rates have increased so drastically. But there's now also the concern that people are needing more care, they're needing it sooner, and the average cost of care in skilled nursing has increased and is expected to continually increase. So not only are you staying there longer, it's now costing you more. And so then the question becomes, how do I even pay for this? Well, if you have a monthly income that is high enough that it can cover you, fantastic. But that number, unfortunately, for a lot of people needs to be about $15,000 to $20,000 every single month. Most of us do not fall then into a category where just our income alone could pay for those needs. Then we're looking at your savings. Did you save? Do you have retirement plans that can be used? Did you have enough that you could now afford that $15,000 to $20,000 bill every single month? But then there's the concern of, well, what about the spouse that may be healthy? Am I going to deplete all of our hard-earned assets to take care of the one? Or am I going to save it essentially to be able to take care of myself? And that's really not a choice. That is an absolutely impossible scenario that we see way too frequently. Then it's, do I sell my house to pay for it? Do I liquidate all of my stuff to ensure that I can get rid of things and pay? Again, not a great choice. Leaning on your family, having long-term care insurance, the government, all of these options are good if you have the money or the resources, but with the cost that we are seeing, so few people unfortunately do. So one of the big things that we offer is a trust that actually allows you to not only protect your primary residence, but also your secondary properties. There are a lot of things that come with Medi-Cal protection, and that's what I'm talking about. If you ever need long-term skilled nursing, we do have a trust that allows you to not only qualify for Medi-Cal, but you can also keep all of those hard-earned assets, including those properties that you have acquired. So your primary residence is generally automatically protected so long as you consider it a primary residence. But again, what if you have to sell it or rent it? Then those proceeds or that rental income are unprotected. Secondary properties are just not protected. Medi-Cal will use those to disqualify someone on a financial basis. But again, with our trust, all of your properties and that rental income and any sales proceeds can be protected so that your loved one can still qualify for Medi-Cal so that you are not just sitting there depleting all of those resources. There's a few other ways that you can also protect your properties and have some benefits from a legacy standpoint. One of the ways that you can do that is with what's called a charitable remainder trust. Now, one of our attorneys, Sunny Boren, actually heads our business and tax department. So she often works very closely with our founder, Lloyd Kopenbarger, to maximize people's taxable benefits. So by setting up one of these trusts, you can actually reduce your taxable estate. So if you have an estate that is of, at this point, more than about $5 million, because we're projecting a few years out and looking at what the government may do, if you're sitting here with an estate, including, again, your real property's gross value of more than 5 million, I would recommend that you call us and make an appointment with Sunny to talk about one of these trusts to see if you need something to reduce your taxable estate. One of the other things you may have heard quite a bit about recently is what's called Proposition 19. Now, let me be clear, Proposition 19 did have a few benefits for seniors, but unfortunately, it had a lot of negative ramifications on people who are inheriting properties. It essentially limited it to saying that the only property that can even qualify to keep your property taxes when you passed on is your primary residence, but now your child must also occupy that primary residence and claim it as their primary for at least the occupying within 1 year and then staying permanently to keep that property tax bill low. This is something that has, again, drastically changed the benefits of people inheriting properties, and so has also then drastically increased the need to talk to a real estate agent about selling homes. What's the best option for me? What am I going to be looking at from a cost standpoint? Now, one of the good things, though, is that we can actually help still when it comes to Prop 19. So there is language that we can put in your trust to help maximize options for children, and it drastically increases the likelihood of actually keeping your property tax basis for your child who inherits it. This is something that I would strongly recommend that if you have more than one child, you come and talk to us about, because this is language that was not often used prior to Proposition 19 going into effect. So if you have not had your document reviewed in the last about 2 years at this point, it's probably well worth it and the right time to come in to ensure that we can maximize your tax protection and your children's inheritance. Now, I mentioned our attorney Sunny Boren earlier, and this is another area that she can help all of our clients in, and that is with LLC protection. So LLCs not only protect your personal assets, but it can also protect any of your purchases of rental properties moving forward from Proposition 19. So again, even though Proposition 19 is in effect, there are still things that we can do. So if you have multiple properties where you're concerned about protection in the event of a lawsuit, that if a renter gets hurt on one of your properties, it can't touch anything else you have. If you're concerned about Proposition 19 and how to ensure that taxes on properties do not raise drastically when you pass away, or if you just have some questions about it, please reach out to us, because this is something we can absolutely help you with. Now, one of the other categories, if you're sitting here today, may be, what do I do if I have inherited a property? What does that look like? What am I going to pay? There's so many questions that come after not only someone's passed away, but when you actually start inheriting those assets. So one of the big questions has to do with capital gains if you sell. So if you have inherited, let's say, your parents' primary residence, what you should have done, and if you haven't, it's okay, but what should happen is that you get what's called an appraisal done on that property. That appraisal essentially sets a date of death value that becomes your new ground floor. What I mean by that is, if the property, as of, let's say, your dad passed second, your dad passed away January 1st, and that property as of January 1st was worth $1 million. If you then turned around and sold it June 1st for $1 million, you are not looking at a capital gain bill. So for children inheriting properties, those properties may have value that they don't even fully realize. So this is again where it's important to not only have an estate planning attorney who can advise, but to also have a real estate agent who understands this enough that they can help point you in the right direction. One of the other pieces, though, is that if you have inherited property, then you do still need to ensure you have a trust to protect that new asset. So again, if you don't have a trust already, if you didn't have one when you inherited property and you still haven't gotten around to doing it, or if you had a trust, but when you inherited that property, you didn't put it into the trust, please come and talk to us, because we can help you ensure that that property is protected. Now, I mentioned probate earlier. One of the issues that we often see is something called a refinance problem. Often when clients come in, they set up their trust, we put their property into the trust to protect it. 5 years goes down the line and they've refinanced. Almost without question, when somebody refinances, that property is not only taken out of the trust, but very, very rarely does it get put back into the trust by the refinance company. So a lot of times our clients are walking around thinking their property is protected, but it actually is not, which could subject it back to probate, which I talked about earlier. So if you have refinanced, absolutely talk to us, to your real estate agent, to the title company, some way verify, is my property actually still protected? Because if it is not, again, you are then risking probate. But that is where I keep saying it. Working with a real estate agent who understands trusts and why they are so important is crucial, because they are the person who gets to remind you to establish a trust or take title in the trust you already have. And that is why we are so, so thankful that we have Kelly as one of the people that we can rely on and that we know is there to help ensure her clients are taken care of in every aspect, that it's not just the real estate component, it's your legacy and it's everything that comes with that. So I am actually going to now turn it over to her. So Kelly, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Victoria. Make sure I'm not on mute. Thank you, Victoria. All really good information. Good morning. My name is Kelly Dipple. I represent the Kelly Dipple Real Estate Group. I am with Coldwell Banker in Los Gatos. And a big part of my business is called transitions. And I focus a big part of my business on our senior population and also empty nesters, people that are heading into retirement, relocation. And it's just really important to, like, as Victoria said, make sure that your property is protected. So I'm here today to talk to you about the current housing market. There's a lot that goes into the current housing market. There's interest rates, there's the issues going on right now with Russia and Ukraine, the impact that COVID has had the last few years, inventory and inflation. I can tell you that a few years ago or 3 years ago, when the COVID pandemic hit, I thought that we were going to be unemployed. I thought that, the sky's falling, and actually the COVID pandemic changed the way people view their houses. So it used to be, people were living in apartments or condos or single family homes, but COVID really changed the way the housing market was viewed. And a big part of that is that COVID made people look at their homes differently. People started thinking, where do I want to live? Where do I want to be? People started thinking, like, in apartment living and condo living, sharing walls, sharing, sharing elevators, that kind of was not really the thing that people wanted to do. So people really started looking at single family homes. And that really started driving up the housing market. Then we also have super low inventory. Inventory is historically low right now. And then we have the low interest rates. Interest rates were, low 2% a few years ago. Now they're reaching, the 3 to 5%, which is still historically low, but that is driving buyers to really go after different properties. And it's kind of a frenzy, really. So the inflation is also another factor that is going to be driving our housing market. But basically, the low inventory and the low interest rates is causing buyers to scramble for houses. So people ask, is it the right time to sell? Is it the right time to buy? And the answer to both right now is yes. And the reason for that is, again, right now, buyers are, after these properties, and they're throwing big money at properties right now, which is helping sellers, but also buyers don't want to be priced out, and interest rates are going to go up. So they are predicting by the end of this year, they're going to be about 5.5%. And by the end of next year, we're going to be 6.5%, which is still low. I mean, I remember buying my first house and I was like, I think at 8.5%. But, these low interest rates have people scrambling. So that is what's going on with our current housing market. Another thing I wanted to mention is right now our largest demographic is the over 55 community. And a lot of people being over 55, they're going into retirement. And then we also have people that don't have to stay here. We have the working remotely factor that's come into play since the COVID pandemic, which makes people kind of rethink again where they want to live. So people are kind of like dreaming, like, where do I want to be? Where do I want to live? And it's making people actually think about, maybe it's time to sell my house. Maybe it's time to rent my house and move elsewhere. Maybe your dream is living on a beach, or maybe your dream is, living in Colorado and you want to be close to the ski resorts, or maybe you want to be in Florida or close to family and friends. But again, it's definitely changing the way people are viewing their homes. Next slide. Okay, so transitions. What can I do for you? I have a full team that I work with, and we do free consultation. I have the full team that can help with everything from decluttering services, document shredding, coordinating donations. I have somebody who does estate sales. Even estate sales are done differently now. That used to be people would come through your house. And now they do everything online. I have people that can haul things away for you. I mentioned document shredding. I have people that can help you pack your things, plan on what to take to your new home, help you unpack, help you with the move. I even have people that can help you set up your internet. Basically, if you can think about something that you need done, I can find somebody to get it done for you. I actually had a client that was moving into Atria Assisted Living in Almaden, and he had an old BMW that he hadn't driven in years. It was sitting in his garage. The tires were flat, the engine didn't run, and he wanted to get rid of it before he sold his home. And so we found a service that would sell the car for him. I also had a gal that was moving into assisted living, and she had a drawer full of broken gold chains, and she was just going to dump them. And I said, well, let's not do that. Let's sell the gold. And she made over $2,000 on that. She was so happy. So, just trying to make everything easy for you and your family. That's what I'm here for. Selling may not be the answer. It's important to discuss your tax implications and how to protect your family and your estate with a trusted advisor before you decide to sell your home. But if selling does make sense for you, then it's very, very important that you determine the value of your home. Things like Zillow and things like Redfin and Trulia and realestate.com, those use algorithms, and that's not really a reliable source of information. So it's really important that you look at the market. What is the market doing? What are current home sales doing that are good comps for you, for your home? So you can determine the value of your home. It's very important that you have home inspections done up front. So that way, when a buyer does come to your home, or if you decide to rent your home, you want to make sure that a renter or a possible buyer knows exactly what they're getting involved in before they get involved. So that way you're getting the best price up front. It's important that you look at any repairs and updates. And again, I have a team of fabulous that can help you with any updates, repairs, cleaning services. Staging is something that is very important and very necessary, and a lot of people don't understand it. It's very important that we have your home looking very uncluttered. And again, this is for selling or renting. You want it to look uncluttered. You want it to be neutral, paint, flooring. You want it to be neutral. So that way, any prospective buyer or renter coming into your home, they're looking at this home as a blank canvas and they can envision themselves living there. Again, that helps you get the best price for your home. I have a professional photographer and videographer that I work with on my team, and they provide just the top of the line videos. We do virtual walkthroughs, photos. The virtual tours was something that was huge the last 2 years because people didn't feel comfortable going into homes, which is now changing, but it's now something that we're moving forward. Each property has its own website. And then of course, print and TV advertising is all part of what goes into selling. And I have to say renting your home, because either way you want to get top dollar for your home. Next slide. So options. So when people look at renting or selling their home, there's a lot of reasons that go into that. And it could be, maybe they have stairs and this is just it's not manageable. Maybe they want to be closer to family and friends. I mentioned before, maybe moving to Florida where it's a warmer climate. I have a lot of clients that are moving into assisted living or retirement communities because their home is just too much for them to take on anymore. The biggest demographic right now that we have is the over 55 community, and the over 55 community is looking at their lives differently. And COVID has helped us actually look at our lives differently. Again, where do I want to be? Where do I want to spend the next phase of my journey? And so again, selling or renting, we look at all these different factors to decide what works best for you. If you are thinking about moving into an assisted living or a retirement community, contact me because I have people that can help you navigate your options, because there's so many options out there. It can be very stressful and frustrating for you and your family. Next slide, please. And then again, I like to think of myself as your trusted advisor. I have my SRES, which is a senior real estate specialist designation. I am with AARP. I consider myself your advocate. I want to be here for you as your trusted resource. I provide full service, and my goal is just to make this the next phase of your journey, wherever you're transitioning, I want to make it easy for you and your family.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
So we did go through a lot of information in a pretty short amount of time. And so just to recap a little bit, we talked about what every adult should have. And again, that was that healthcare directive and that financial power of attorney. If you are sitting there with real property, you absolutely then also need to be talking about having a trust set up and making sure that if you already have one set up, that it is properly funded and that your properties are protected within it. We also went through different ways to actually protect that property. So again, we talked about trusts. We talked about protecting it in the event of needing long-term skilled nursing. Kelly mentioned that her demographic of 55 and up is reevaluating their lives, and that's very similar for our client base. They're now looking at protecting themselves from long-term skilled nursing costs and protecting their legacy for whomever they want it to go to, whether that be family, charities, friends, the church, whatever that looks like. We don't want to see your estate just depleted when we could have prevented that. And that also then again transitioned into not having your estate depleted unnecessarily due to taxes. And so that's when you can be looking at, again, alternate options or additional options to your trust, including that charitable remainder trust. And then of course I talked LLCs briefly. Again, if you are concerned about creditor protection or Proposition 19 protection, LLCs and other language within your trust are ways that we can do that. So there are so many ways to ensure that that piece of property, no matter what the actual monetary value is protected. So much of the value of our estate comes from the emotional value that we put on it. So that may be the home that you bought for $50,000, but that your children grew up in, or that you and your spouse shared and built a home in. That is something that is worth protecting. It is something that you really need to ensure that your estate planning attorney understands that just as much as your real estate attorney does, and that they are working in sync with each other to ensure that that legacy really does carry forward. If you have questions on anything that we have talked about, if you have questions on anything that Kelly talked about, I'm going to put up a slide in just a minute that will have Koppenbarger's contact information on it. Again, we went through quite a bit, and so I know often these can lead to more questions sometimes, especially about your specific scenario. So if that is the case, we are here to help. Now, the why Koppenbarger piece is this firm has been open since 1979, and it was founded by Lloyd Koppenbarger with the absolute intent that every client who walked through the door had a legacy that matters. And again, that legacy could be a financial one. It can be a monetary or an emotional legacy. It could be a religious legacy. It doesn't matter what you are wanting that legacy to be, it matters. And that has been instilled in every attorney that has been hired at our firm and every single staff member that we have. So we are here to protect you and ensure that that legacy is carried forward. Our attorneys are incredibly educated and qualified, and continually are looking to develop themselves and gain new certificates and new degrees and pretty much stay up to date on every single thing that is coming down the pipeline. And what that then allows us to do is give our clients you that information so that you have it in a tangible form, and that you know your attorneys really are looking out for anything that could attack you, your estate, or your loved ones. Now, Kelly, I'm going to turn it back to you for this.
All right. So as I mentioned, I am with Coldwell Banker. Coldwell Banker is the largest brokerage worldwide. I mentioned that I'm a senior real estate specialist. That means that I am trained and certified to be your trusted advisor when it comes to your senior real estate needs. I'm also a global luxury real estate partner within Coldwell Banker. I'm also a part of the TAN network, which is the top agent network, and that is throughout California. As I mentioned, I'm an advocate for my seniors, and I love what I do. This is probably, I mean, buying and selling property is fabulous, and I love what I do. But when I get to work with the seniors, that just really makes me feel good, and that's what I love to do. So I would like to be your referral source. If you have any needs, reach out. I am here to help.
Perfect. Now we did get a question. So we can answer it now, but if the answer leads to further questions on the next slide, you can contact us to set up an appointment. So the question is, if I move from my current primary residence to another property, how long must I reside in that residence to actually qualify your heirs to keep your property taxes under Prop 19 rules? So at a minimum, this is more actually of a tax question and what we're looking at with the IRS and the county. And so at a minimum, we're looking at about a 2-year period. Now, this is something I would recommend that we discuss further to ensure that based on your situation, we're not missing anything, or that there is some reason that wouldn't be the case. So like I said, I would still recommend contacting us to make sure that we specifically deal with your situation. All right. Now, again, if there's any other questions for either Kelly or myself, please reach out to us at the Koppenberger number or website. We can connect you with Kelly. I also know that her information was put into the chat. And so if you do have any questions for her directly, she's put her information there. Again, we covered quite a bit, so I'm sure we're leaving you with more questions in some ways than answers for your specific situations. And that's very normal because every single family and every single individual has different needs. And again, it's why you need an estate planning attorney that knows to customize a trust to you, that you have a real estate agent who's looking at not only what is your life today, but what could your life be in the next few years to ensure that any property you have really will fit those needs. So thank you again for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it. We actually had one more question. I think we've got a few more minutes. So let's see. This is actually a really important one because it has to do with essentially incapacity, generally speaking. And it's, if I'm the power of attorney for my brother and he doesn't have a trust, can you start that process? This gets a little more complicated, like I had mentioned earlier, that our options become more limited when someone cannot set up documents for themselves. You are not excluded from protecting a loved one or protecting them in a way that they can't do for themselves. But setting up a trust is going to look a lot different if they can't do it or sign it themselves. So definitely come and talk to us if you're in a position where you have a loved one who can't set it up themselves. Again, you haven't lost all options, but it is going to be a little bit more complicated. All right. So thank you again. We're going to stay on for a couple more minutes in case any more questions come in, but also so that you have our contact information. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much, everybody.